Good day and welcome to this special edition of Spotlight we call GM's Corner. Before the virus tragic, uh, what used to be a regular series of conversations with LMOA's General Manager Steve Hurwitz about what's on his desk and what's on his mind. We're hoping to get back and resume that regular schedule, albeit with safety measures and some social distancing, as perhaps you can tell. Mr. General Manager, long time between drinks, as the old saying goes. It's nice to be back. I'm sure we all wish it were under happier circumstances. It's been a very tough time for certainly you and your staff, our staff, had an awful lot on their plates.
Ron, and I assume that's Ron there. You sound like Ron.
Used to be.
Yes. So very glad to be back, and I'm glad that we may be returning to some semblance of normalcy, or at least enough to allow time to do this, which is very important, and I appreciate the whole broadcast group and you being able to do this.
Well, thank you. This Lake Monticello is reopening, of course, as the governor's restrictions allow. What kind of factors go into how we treat each of our facilities and amenities?
Well, that has been a huge task, a significant task, and one we take very seriously. So what happens is the directives that come directly from the state, from the Commonwealth of Virginia, out of the governor's office as executive directives, and then there are also guidelines attached to them, and the guidelines are much longer, much more detailed than the executive directives themselves. So we're kind of in a new world in phase two. Phase one had directives, which were certain requirements that we were able to put into place. So we follow the directives as rule number one to the extent possible. I mean, to the extent they apply, to the extent we have a facility that matches up. And then we're careful not to go beyond that, but we can go below that in terms of, what we're operating and not operating. So one big factor when we get the guidelines, either for phase one, which we're now out of, now into phase two, is can we apply it? So for example, when we got into phase two, the guidelines were 40 odd pages long, and we received them on a Wednesday afternoon. That's when they were published, to be put into place on the ensuing Friday. So that was quite a task to make sure we were doing things, and what we just, it seemed best at that time to not get ahead of ourselves, make sure we clearly understood exactly what was being directed, how it applied, and could we carry it out, and then on top of that, to make sure we had written instructions agreed upon and understood, and the training done before we did that. So that came into play with the pool. Concerning phase two, we decided not to go any further than we are right now, with basically just lap swim. We did expand it slightly. Instead of just one person in a lap, it's now 3, as long as they're from the same household, allowed. And I actually have seen families swimming laps in the same lane. So there's a kind of a triage we go through to make sure we understand the directives, how they apply, how we're able to do it, put them in writing. So in terms of doing that, it's, if that seems complicated, it's even harder than that, or at least more demanding. And again, we take it seriously. So with tennis pickleball, there was a long series of exchanges with a volunteer who who volunteered to be the spokesman for both tennis and pickleball people, and we had discussions about what does apply, what doesn't apply, what they knew, what they thought would work, and
That's good.
and we were finally able to open that up with the onset of phase two last Friday. Even then, we found a couple of items worth clarifying, which we are, about how it applies exactly. So we go through quite a sequence with each and every one of the plans. Food and beverage, extremely detailed. Golf, extremely detailed. Marina falls into a category. So all of the facilities really are subject to very careful consideration.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so some they do take some fine tuning. Of course, with the golf course, obviously everything was shut down totally. Obviously, in the first go round for a while now, and then opening up to just the back nine or the front nine for play, and now full play over the 18 holes. But again, with cart distancing and things of that nature, still things I presume like not touching the pin and things of that nature, still in effect at the golf course. I'm sure those rules are posted by Mark in the pro shop.
They are, although even there's a requirement with each of the facilities. There's a requirement to kind of independently, another set of eyeballs, come in and take a look and make sure they're being adhered to. We're in the middle of doing that, and I don't think it'll be terrible duty to do that with golf, but certainly we want to look and make sure that the procedures that are in place are indeed being followed
Mm-hmm.
with kind of a quality control program that's in place. In fact, I just met with maintenance this morning on the very subject. They're carrying a huge load and a big responsibility and doing a fine job. But even there, spent some time looking at administratively how they're doing it and getting coverage. Fortunately, like all our departments, they're in good hands, doing a great job, very carefully. But it still needs checking, and there's sometimes when you check, you find things that could be fine-tuned. So I don't doubt that we will continue
Yeah.
to do that.
Yeah, I'm sure. And in all candor, on the golf course, I personally have seen, of course, single occupancy carts, except for a couple, and but you'd have 3, 4 carts pull up, and yet the guys, most part guys, were kind of socializing next to each other as they normally do, and not wearing masks. And I'm thinking, yeah, well, they're pretty close together and they're not wearing masks. I don't know how that works, but I hope it works for them. I hope it works well for them.
Well, certainly we need to be fact-based about everything we're doing. So that'll certainly factor in to
Yeah.
a review. As I said, we're looking at, I believe, everything
Yeah.
we're doing. We do not want to get ahead of ourselves. Although there's a bit of an irony involved with Phase 2 scheduled to last according to the Virginia Forward Plan put out by the governor's office. Phase 2 was planned to last from 2 to 4 weeks, anywhere between 2 and 4 weeks in duration. So that 2 weeks will expire on June 19th, which would mean we're in Phase 3. And so we're not far from Phase 3 as we're recording this session. That means that we have to be ready. However, the guidance isn't out. We do
Yeah.
have five or so bullet points, if you will,
Yeah.
about what Phase 3 will look like. So we're starting to talk about exactly what does that mean, what is it likely to mean, and what can we do so we're ready for it, because the transition could come as early as, again, 10 days from now, or it could be, according to the plan, as much as 4 weeks
Mm-hmm.
from the 5th, which puts us into right on top of July 4th.
Yeah.
So we just have to be ready for every eventuality. But while we're doing that, we also want to make sure on a day-by-day basis we're checking, following up on things. And we certainly are glad to do that. That's a big part of it.
Yeah. And now the pub has reopened inside as well as on the deck, correct?
Yes.
It was nice to hear that actually during the time when it was takeout only, of course, they had to pair staff, but their numbers were pretty good, which was very encouraging. So I would certainly think that and especially nice weather, people can eat on the deck, that augurs well for that side of the operation.
Well, the pub itself is a remarkable story, Ron, and I'm glad you brought that up. Billy Casper Golf, as a contractor and partner, has been running it since the first of the year, and then they know what they're doing, and they took their time evaluating and getting going. Once they got going, they had quite a head of steam going. People seemed to be very pleased with the food and the service, and food and beverage is involved with many factors. They're called food and service and service and food and service. That's what we all want, and they were doing very well. Then when COVID hit, of course, that was a real step backwards. But as you pointed out, they've done very well by managing the situation very closely, and surprisingly well, not only in terms of balancing financially, hugely reduced scope of operations, but very tightly managed, so they were doing well. But maybe something even more enlightening about how well they've done is that they're getting new customers who've not been customers before because of different kinds of service, including the takeout and delivery. So we're very pleased also that the pool snack bar just opened last weekend, and that was a smash success, even though the pool isn't really fully open at all. But they did very well in there with a lot of people very happy. I talked to a lot of people who loved the food they were eating from the snack bar, and especially the slushies. That seems to be slushy center of Fluvanna County right there. So, that's a great story. So now that we're able to open up here in the pub even more, we think that's going to really take off with an awful lot of patronage and people that are happy, even proud of what's now going on in the pub.
Yeah, and they're going to continue takeout as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, they plan to because it's been such a success.
Yeah, I can vouch for it. The meals I've had are great.
Yes, and I hear the meals for four that they've been selling are actually meals for four twice. That the quantity is there, but that's because they're a professional outfit and they know what they're doing.
Well, that's nice. You referenced the lead into July 4th, so that's, I presume, is going to guide what we're able to plan for?
It is. It's certainly problematic. That word was coined for this situation. It's difficult because of the timing and the restrictions. We don't know what they're going to be. And we have a contractual arrangement with the fireworks provider, so we're watching that very carefully and trying to protect all options. I will say this, the normal July 4th, with all the events that we have, that would be extremely daunting because we would have had to have been planning that all along in the middle of working through COVID.
Yeah.
So we want to be prudent about that. Certainly, if phase 2 were still in effect at the time of July 4th, having an event at all would be prohibited because you cannot have an event that invites the general public, which we're very proud of. That's always a big part of July 4th. We're kind of central Virginia, at least Fluvanna County and surrounding areas in Albemarle, come for all the events, and it's great.
Yes.
That would be extremely difficult to carry out, even if we had the time to plan it, which has not been really available to us. So we're looking at what can we do on July 4th and trying to stay ready for whatever is possible to do safely under the directives as they exist then. But again, we're very anxious to get the guidance to phase 3, and maybe we'll be in phase 3, and that will allow some, to keep some of the traditional part of July 4th, even though, again, the major activity that we have really looks very difficult to do.
Yeah, and well, so that is, and it's dependent basically upon the experience in the Commonwealth of Virginia as a whole, really, at that time that governs that timing of the phases, and which brings me, do we know specifically what kind of impact there has been here at the lake in terms of COVID positivity or hospitalizations?
We don't know specifically, and there's a reason for that. We're not a governmental agency. We're not plugged into the system. We're an HOA, so we're not privy to information that of that type. However, we've asked. We thought it would be useful to know that in terms of our planning. Maybe not in what we pass on to all residents, but just in terms of our planning. And what we've been advised of several times is, no, we're not really privy to that. However, what we have learned is that first responders, fire and rescue, ambulance service, when they're dispatched to a home, they're notified if there's COVID impact
Mm-hmm.
at a particular residence, so they can take appropriate measures. And so that's at least comforting. But in terms of if there have or haven't been any cases, I've heard a rumor or two, but that's all. I don't really know much more than anybody,
Mm-hmm.
and we've not been advised. We've also been advised we're not a health agency.
Yeah.
That's not our role, our expertise.
Yeah. Well, we certainly, our friends and literally and our neighbors who are involved, not our fire and rescue. We have 2 medical facilities based here at the lake. We have several doctors and nurses who live here at the lake, and so a number of folks are certainly out there on the front lines, and I guess every night we say a prayer for them and for each other as we go along. So you mentioned you're planning, trying to plan for a phase 3 where you have only sketchy outline at this point. Must be a little, I guess you're kind of guessing in some places?
We're estimating.
Estimate. Oh, better word.
Fancy word for guessing. And the
That's
answer is
better.
yes. That's all we can do. What happened in phase 1 and what's happened in phase 2 should be a clue, and we're taking those as strong evidence of the direction we think it might go, as well as what's been laid out in very generic terms, very brief terms, for phase 3. So we'd like to not be completely surprised or taken aback by it, and we'd like to be ready for it. So it's important that we be ready, because there may not be, whatever it is we want to put into effect promptly and properly. So yes, we are doing a little bit of forecasting.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, by the way, let me mention about the fire department. The history of the Lake Monticello Fire Department is long and glorious here. It was part of the lake proper, and now it's a separate entity. And they do a fantastic job, and as close as they are to the lake is really a great thing. It's great in terms of response time.
Oh, yeah.
I'm told it helps with insurance rates that they're so close. But in any case, they did have a funding shortage due to COVID and the lack of their normal fundraising. And there's been an effort by some volunteers in the community to raise money for them, which is wonderful, laudable. And what I'd like to ask anybody that's listening in, the fire department has started its normal annual fundraising.
Yes.
And I just encourage people to think about how valuable that service is, and to consider that when they are thinking about making a contribution.
Well, it's one of the best. It's one of the best investments that anyone can ever make. When you consider the involvement of fire and rescue, and including the ambulance, the emergency service, not only here at the lake, but the work they have done all these years in covering 70% of the county, and especially during the day. And they have just had a whale of a time, especially as members age and all of that. But they have done it, and they have served the county and, of course, and the lake. And it is such an asset when time is of the essence, and in so many events. But glad you raised that, and I think we all ought to consider as you suggest. Well, we go forward into this uncertain future. For the next, when we meet, perhaps we will have more definitive word, and we look forward to that.
Ron, I would very much like us to be able to talk without the masks.
Okay. Well, so yes, so would I. So would I. But we all have to be smart also, and be of concern for ourselves and, of course, for others. So.
Yes.
So, sir, until we see you again with further update, which we hope is back on that more normal schedule, we appreciate this and wish you all good fortune going forward. We've been talking with LMOA's General Manager Steve Hurwitz, and we're hoping that you will tune in for more of these episodes. We're going to get back to that regular schedule, and it's all obviously extremely important to convey as far as information to the community. So please stay with us and your good old Channel 977 or up on YouTube, all brought to you by your favorite LMOA broadcast group. So for the group, till we see you next time, thanks for watching. I'm Ron Krause. Good day.